Okay, so some stuff about our author. So his actual name was Eric Arthur Blair. The George Orwell was just his pen name. And he was born June 25th, 1903, and he died on January 21st, 1950 from tuberculosis.
His education, Memphis State Kirkland Boarding School in Eastboro. After he completed school at Eaton, found himself at a dead end. Family could not afford a university education. He went to the Imperial Police Force, resigned from post in Burma, and returned to England to become a writer.
Okay, so childhood, he was a shy kid and he lacked self-confidence and he was always sick and battled with bronchitis and the flu. And he always spent long hours reading. And an important quote that I thought, described him well was, I had the lonely child's habit of making up stories and holding conversations with imaginary persons. And I think from the very start, my literary ambitions were mixed up with the feeling of being isolated and undervalued.
His parents, Richard Wilmsey Blair, British civil servant, and he stayed behind, rarely visited dull conservative, never had a strong bond. She retired in 1912. But Ada Mabel, I'm not sure if I pronounced that last name. But she raised Orwell and his two sisters. One of his wives was Elaine Shaughnessy, June 1936 to 1945. Not fond of adoption, loved their son, had many mistresses in marriage, suffered silently, died during hysterectomy, heart attack. His other wife, Sonia Brownell, October 1949 to 1950, as his friend's assistant, married on her deathbed. Not fit to be a stepmother. His children, Richard Bardo Blair, in 1944, and he's still alive today. Claimed to be sterile, desperate for a son, adopted at 3 weeks old, later raised by his aunt.
And this was said by his son. So he said a heart of deep paternal affection. So he always, like, in all of the interviews that they did with his son, he said that his father was very loving and nurturing. And it's probably because his father was really dull and conservative and they never had, like, a good relationship. So. Okay, so at the age of 4 is whenever he wrote his first poem, and then at the age of 11, he actually had a poem published in the local newspaper. He struggled after he left the Imperial Police Force and did a bunch of odd jobs like washing dishes and other things until he could start up his writing career. His first 2 books were Down and Out in Paris and London in 1933, and then Burmese Days in 1934, which this really took off his career. He also wrote numerous essays and reviews, and he built himself a reputation for producing well-crafted literary criticism. And he was a producer at BBC from 1941 to 1943. And T.S. Eliot and E.M. Forster were some of the literary geniuses that appeared on his programs. Okay, so these are some of his key pieces of literature. Now, he wrote a lot of stuff, but these are the most popular. So, Down and Out in Paris and London in 1933 was his first book, and then Burmese days in 1934, a clergyman's daughter in 1935, keep the Aspidistra flying in 1936, the road to Wigan Pier in 1937, homage to Catalina in 1938, coming up for air in 1939, 1945 Animal Farm, which is our novel, and then 1949 he came out with 1984. Okay, so these are some of his awards and distinctions. So the Prometheus Hall of Fame award he got for both Animal Farm and 1984, which were his two most popular books. And then the Retro Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1996, which was after he passed, but that was for Animal Farm.
Oh, sorry. The summary of the book. So the book takes place on Manor Farm, where Old Major, who is a prize-winning boar, has a dream where all animals live together with no human oppression or control. After his dream, he calls a meeting with all of the other animals and shared his new ideas. So the animals said that they would work towards this paradise. And then Old Major comes up with a song called The Beasts of England, and that displays his ideas in lyrical form. So Old Major passed away shortly after his dream, but the animals decided to still follow his dream. So they ran the farmer, Mr. Jones, off in the land after Old Major's death, and decided to start working towards the animal farm. So Animal Farm prospers until Mr. Jones returns to take back the farm. He's defeated by the animals, and they call this the Battle of Cowshed, and they took Mr. Jones's gun as a victory prize. So two pigs, Napoleon and Snowball, begin to argue over time, and they struggle with power and influence. Snowball works towards teaching animals to read, and Napoleon takes a group of puppies to educate them on the principles of animalism. And then Snowball has an idea to build a windmill for electricity, and Napoleon disagrees with that. So after Snowball gives a passionate speech regarding the windmill at a meeting, he's chased off of the farm by the dogs that Napoleon had taken to educate, but he was actually making them into attack dogs. So then Snowball got ran off the farm. After Snowball is ran off of the farm, Napoleon becomes the leader, and he decides that there will no longer be meetings. He decided that pigs will make all the decisions, and then he changes his mind about the windmill, and the animals begin working hard on the project. Boxer, the cart horse, devotes himself to the farm, and especially the project of the windmill, and he has two quotes, which are, "Napoleon is always right," and "I will work harder." And he just works really diligently with and for Napoleon. Okay, so after a large storm, the animals find the windmill knocked over, and Napoleon immediately blames Snowball. So, he says that he was trying to sabotage the farm. So Napoleon begins to portray Snowball as a villain. Soon Napoleon begins acting more like a human, which is against the animalistic principles. At this point, he's sleeping in a bed, drinking whiskey, and engaging in trade, which are all things against animalism. Squealer justifies Napoleon's actions. He's his propagandist, and he claims that he's a great leader, but the common animals are cold, hungry, and overworked. So clearly he's not a great leader. So Mr. Frederick, a neighboring farmer, he cheats Napoleon out of the purchase of timber, and then he proceeds to dynamite the farm, and this destroys the windmill, which they had rebuilt after the storm, and it took a lot of expense and time and work. This began a battle between Animal Farm and a human farm. So after years pass, after the battle, the pigs become more like humans. They walk upright, wear clothing, and they start carrying whips to discipline the other common animals. Eventually the 7 principles of animalism were reduced down to all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So just saying that the common animals are equal, but the pigs are superior to common animals. They're the leaders. Napoleon allies himself with a human farmer named Mr. Pilkington and changes the name of Animal Farm back to Manor Farm. At this point, when looking at the elites, meaning the pigs, the common animals could no longer decipher which was a pig and which was a human being. So basically the farm was right back to oppression. Although it wasn't like human, the pigs became what they were trying to get away from.
Key characters. All right. So Old Major was an award-winning board with a vision of a socialist utopia, which sparked the rebellion against Mr. Jones. He represents the German political economics of Karl Marx, and the Russian revolutionary leader of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Napoleon, who becomes the leader of the animal farm after chasing Snowball off, uses military force to intimidate other animals and get his way with whatever he wants. He raised the 9 attack dogs, and he represents Joseph Stalin after he took over and changed everything in Russia. Snowball was the other pig who was fighting Napoleon for power over with the farm. He was intelligent and passionate, not very devious like Napoleon. He didn't want total control of the farm like Napoleon did. He represents Leon Trotsky. Squealer, he spread Napoleon's propaganda across the farm, praising Napoleon as a very good leader. He showed that he represents the powerful people that were in Russia at the time that spread false truths about what was really going on in Russia at the time. Benjamin is an old donkey, not very inspired by the rebellion. His argument was that donkeys live a long time, so he's old. He believes life is going to be unpleasant no matter what happens, so he's unwilling and honestly unable to oppose Napoleon's rise to power. Boxer is a hard-working cart horse. He was pretty much the pride and joy of the whole farm. He was incredibly strong, very dedicated, and loyal to his work. He played a very key role in the early stages of the animal farm with helping build the windmill and just farming in general. He was quick to work. He was always on the job half an hour to a full hour earlier than the rest of the animals. But he was also not very smart, so he was easily influenced one way or another. But for the most part, he just followed Napoleon, hence his saying, Napoleon is always right. He represents the ideal Soviet workers under the Stalinist communism. Minimus is a poetic. He writes verses about Napoleon and the patriot song "Animal Farm, Animal Farm," which replaced the Beasts of England, because Napoleon didn't want the animals to sing Beasts of England anymore. He shows the artists, the musical artists, any form of artists, that began to thrive by making the dictators look good. Clover was a female cart horse who was a close friend of Boxer's, and was always suspecting that after Napoleon rose to power that they were altering the way things used to be a little bit, but she did not know how to read, so she couldn't tell when the original 7 commandments of animalism were painted on the side of the barn. Most of the animals were unable to read very far, so it was easy for Napoleon to get away with just changing the rules by painting it onto the side of the barn, because they also did not remember very well. Jessie and Bluebell, they were the farmer dogs. They gave birth to the pups that Napoleon took in and eventually turned into his own personal attack dogs. Molly is just another horse, a very flighty mare. She pulled Mr. Jones's carriage and always wanted attention from the humans. She ate sugars, or lumped sugars. She would always have ribbons in her mane. So she showed the lower middle class that fled from Russia during or after the Russian Revolution, because she ran away from the farm shortly after everything changed over and the animals took control, because they found out that she was sneaking over to other farms to eat sugar and have ribbons put in her hair and just get all the attention from humans. Moses is a tame raven. He just tells stories about a magical place called Sugar Candy Mountain, which is a paradise which animals go to when they die. So it's a form of heaven for them. He's kind of there to show the way people will kind of cling to a religion to help calm themselves in harder situations. Because with he left for a while and came back whenever things started to get very difficult for the animals. So he came back and would always tell them about this place. That some of the animals didn't believe him, but it was still reassuring to hear for them. Muriel is a white goat. She read Clover the 7 commandments when she suspected the pigs were in violation of it. Mr. Jones was the farmer who ran Manor Farm before the rebellion began. He was unkind to the animals. He was usually drunk. So he represents Tsar Nicholas II, which is who the Russian Revolution got rid of. And then there's also Mr. Frederick, who's the operator of Pinchfield Farm, which is a neighboring farm to them. He was very untrustworthy. He was shrewd and tough, and he represented Adolf Hitler in this situation. There's Mr. Wemper, who was the solicitor for the animals. He was the one who went back and forth for the animals in order to buy things like for the windmill and other materials they needed. He was the first human that came into communication with the animal farm. So at first the animals were a little untrustworthy of him. They never did quite trust him fully. They just got used to him coming around. Mr. Pilkington is owner of the neighboring farm Foxwood. He attacked the animal farm with Mr. Jones and Mr. Frederick after the timber hoax, whenever he bought the timber with fake money. So but before that, he had business relations with Napoleon quite often.
The key symbols in Animal Farm, the Russian cinnamon is reading under Communist Party rule. The internal structure, the pigs, the dogs, and the animals on the farm. They were like, the pigs were like the police force, the dogs were like, also the police force in the army. The other animals on the farm were like the working class citizens.
Okay, so, key symbols, so the commandments, so these are what we were talking about, at the beginning, so 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And then, number 1, what goes upon 2 legs is an enemy, whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes, no animal shall sleep in a bed, no animal shall drink alcohol, no animal shall kill any other animal, and all animals are equal. So, these demonstrate like the power of propaganda. So throughout the novel, the commandments keep changing, they keep getting shorter, and they keep like changing it so that they would benefit the pigs more. Like how they change 4 legs good to 2 legs bad. They say 4 legs good, 2 legs better when the pigs start walking on 2 legs like humans. It also shows ignorance to everybody around them because they were like all working so hard for Napoleon, and he wasn't doing anything for them. And then they're all altered throughout the novel. So, okay, so the windmill, it was an attempt to modernize Soviet Russia, so that's where, so the book Animal Farm is like a recreation of the Russian Revolution through like farm animals. So, them making the windmill is like how they were trying to modernize Soviet Russia. The pigs manipulate and exploit the other animals by making them work hard and not giving them anything for it, and they use the windmill to profit themselves at the expense of the other animals. Okay, and then key themes. So political allegory is like whenever you make a story about like something that happened like in history through something else. So it shows the rise of Soviet communism under Stalin's rule, and every character represents someone from the Russian Revolution, like all the key people. The pigs represent the Bolshevik leadership members, so these are who they are. They were like really cruel and tough during the Russian Revolution, and the other animals represent the working class citizens who really have no say in what was going on, and they were, you know, being treated badly.
Totalitarianism, it's equality and justice. The leaders become corrupt and incompetent. Pigs adopt human qualities, but cannot speak about the changes in fields. Animals work hard on the farm, but their quality of life is declining.
Okay, so the author's comment to society, so he was trying to portray the people, what it was like for people under Stalinist Russia, like whenever Stalin was in power. They blame every failure on the opposing power, so like in the book, whenever something bad would happen, they would blame it on the working class animals instead of, you know, actually blaming themselves whenever it was their fault. They took advantage of the other's loyalty, so the pigs knew that they would do whatever they said if they promised them something. So they took advantage of that and then never ended up giving them what they promised. It was also written as an attack against communism, in totalitarianism from any source of power, military or political. And George Orwell also was very open about how he felt. Like, he always spoke his political views because nobody else really did that at that time, and whenever he didn't agree with something, he always spoke out about it.
What makes this novel dystopian? Well, dystopian describes an imaginary society that is dehumanizing and unpleasant possible. And this, the suffering of the animals, they used to live happy and peaceful before the revolution. It's now under dictatorship by the pigs. Napoleon put us kind of in control of the dictatorship that he created. And animals continued to suffer under the rule and felt helpless, like there was nothing they could do.